All Blacks versus France, Test 2. The All Blacks said au revoir to France in Test 2, but anyway, we'll get into that in this video. In this video, I'm going to be covering 4 main areas, so I'll give you an overview of the test, give you some analysis of what I thought of both sides in Test 2, and thirdly, we'll cover some key players from the game who played well and some interesting player insights, and then finally, a summary of Test 2. So stick around to the end if you just want to hear my summary of the game. Firstly, an overview of the test. Look, the first 10 was quite interesting. It was a bit error-ridden by the All Blacks. France came out pretty well. There's that saved try by Geordie Barrett and Amoni Narawa down the right wing against the French. And then, look, the All Blacks started to click, and then ultimately that try to Cam Roigard from that brilliant sort of set-piece maul. Christian Leo Willie one side, Cam Roigard went the other. That was exceptional. And then, look, the All Blacks started to really click, and between 10 and 40 minutes, they were phenomenal, weren't they, guys? Like, their attack, the variety, I thought, was particularly effective. The ball handling, their ability to find space. Beauden Barrett's kicking game, whether he's chipping or crossfield kicks, and even Will Jordan kicking for space. Yeah, and the speed they played at, it really was too much for that French defence. So particularly effective from the All Blacks there. Ultimately, half-time, the All Blacks were pretty comfortable, 29-3 to them. And at that point, look, I actually thought the All Blacks were going to push on, and I thought, look, they'll probably put 50 on the French. But ultimately, the French came out in that second half, brought on some subs, and yeah, they really came to play a lot more in that second half. Full-time score, a pretty convincing win to the All Blacks, 43 points to 17. And yeah, back to the drawing board for the French. They'd be pretty annoyed about their performance, but again, this is a B or a C string French side, so maybe not that disappointed. Certainly blooded some new players, the French, and it's good to expose them to test match level rugby. I think firstly, the analysis of both sides, you look at the All Blacks, and yeah, particularly that between 10 minutes and 40 minutes of the game. Look, they were pretty dominant, weren't they? The set piece was phenomenal. I don't think I've seen the All Blacks set piece, particularly that line out, be so accurate and effective under Razor. The throwing by Cody Taylor was spot on. The line-out jumping, Fabian Holland seems to have made a significant difference to that All Blacks line-out. And, you know, that set piece enabled the All Blacks to really get going, play at speed, play with variety, and just really test the French at speed. I thought the other thing as well, the All Blacks defence was definitely a massive step up from Test 1. You could just see at the start the power and physicality that they brought on defence, really in the face of the French, shutting them down, shutting that space down, tackling hard, which didn't enable the French to get their offload game or their passing game going to the extent that they could in Test 1. Yeah, significant improvement there from the All Blacks. And yeah, the other thing I'd say to that is the innovation from the All Blacks I thought was particularly impressive. And this is something I haven't really seen to date from Razor. Particularly, as I said, that try to Cam Roigard, the innovation there of set piece, brilliant. Tested the French there. The speed of passing and the variety on attack, particularly the passing and the offloads that led up to that Tupu Vai try, that was particularly effective. And that attack, if the All Blacks can do that for 65 or 70 minutes of a test match against, world's leading front-running international sides, the Springboks, the English, the Irish, that variety of attack, I'm sure will really test those sides. What I would say about the All Blacks, and potentially this is a bit harsh, but, somewhere for Razor to keep developing with the All Blacks. Look, it did get me thinking about the All Blacks in 2017 when they were probably, and before when they were arguably more ruthless. And got me thinking back to the All Blacks versus Springboks in 2017, where the All Blacks, they had a good night like they did last night against the French, but they just kept coming and coming and coming for 80 minutes. And, they put on a performance 57-0 against the Springboks. I think that's probably what they should have and could have done last night, well, should have really, against this French team. They should have really imposed themselves in that second half, carried on with the speed, the power, the relentlessness that they had in the first half, and ultimately put on a score like that to show World Rugby this is a new All Black side, and they are relentless. They are coming to play for 80 minutes. Unfortunately, the All Blacks, they didn't do that. They were relentless for 40 minutes and put a hell of a performance on in that first half, but they certainly nodded off significantly in the second half. A good win in the end, 43-17, but, that sort of scoreline shouldn't have been that sort of scoreline. This should have been a 50-point plus victory to the All Blacks. Again, these are harsh comments, but, something for the All Blacks to keep developing and get that ruthless edge that they used to, and really take it to these top international rugby sides. Guys, if you're enjoying the content, hit the subscribe button, like the channel, chuck some banter down about Test 2 against the French, what you thought of the All Blacks, what you thought of the French. Chuck the banter down. It's international rugby, brutal, and it's awesome. So chuck it down below. Looking at France, yeah, again, and I'm interested to hear the thoughts of the French community on this channel about what they thought of their side. Look, there was a number of changes made by the French. It is their B or C strength side. Look, I thought the French were particularly effective in Test 1, but yeah, they were well outplayed, particularly in that first half anyway, in this test. I just thought it was surprising that first half there was a number of uncharacteristic errors by the French, knock-ons. There was a kick for the corner that didn't go out. And those errors, they really hurt you at test match level. So French would have been very disappointed by those errors, and ultimately, kicks that don't go out enabled the All Blacks to put some pressure on, get down the other end and score points the other end. So fine margins and a tough night for the French. I thought in the second half, the French were particularly a lot better. They brought that physicality. They were far less error-ridden. And particularly when the bench came on for the French, you saw definitely they went up a level in their power game. They seemed a lot more accurate, a lot more relentless in the face of the All Blacks. So it was interesting to see. Yeah, I think that second half, that the French matched the All Blacks a lot better physically, but certainly that first half, the All Blacks sort of really outmuscled the French physically, which was interesting. For usually the French, they're big men, big powerful forwards, which I was interested to see, and I didn't expect that in the first half anyway. So again, let me know your thoughts on what went wrong for the French in the second test. Key players from the game. Look, I thought he was brilliant. I thought Cam Roigard, and I think the form he showed in the second test, I think he's sort of head and shoulders the form halfback in New Zealand rugby, particularly that the power he brings, sniping around the breakdown. He can muscle up with the big imposing opposition forwards, and particularly his passing, his game management. The ruck speed was much quicker for the All Blacks. His passing and the tempo really helped the All Blacks in that regard, and particularly his defence was solid, Cam Roigard. So he had a good game for the All Blacks. Ardie Savea, look, he's brilliant, isn't he? And another quality performance from Ardie Savea. Obviously, there's that brilliant break that he out on the left side. I think he fended off the French first five, through a gap, offload, and yeah, that was a brilliant break by Ardie Savea. But potentially, his attacking prowess, RDA, he breaks the line so well, the power, the speed that he has. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not they keep him at open side flanker, or that position does give him a bit more time and space for him to roam out wide than as opposed to number 8, where we often saw him a bit tighter, a bit more up the middle. And certainly Ardie Savea out wide, you're seeing another side of Ardie Savea. He's particularly effective, the speed that he has. It'll be interesting to see if they keep him at open side flanker. Jordie Barrett, yeah, look, he was great. I think wasn't sort of a flashy performance by Jordie Barrett, but I think it was very much a performance where, if you look at it again, what he did behind scenes, his work rate on defence, his game management was brilliant. And I would say at the moment, Jordie Barrett is another player that is a level above the other second 5/8s in the country. And particularly there was a number of sort of try-saving tackles that Jordie Barrett, particularly there was that one with Amoni Narawa sort of in the first 10-15 minutes out on the right wing. Brilliant, high work rate and a really good performance by Jordie there. To France, look, it was a tough night for them. I thought a couple of their players stepped up really well. Emilien Gailleton on the wing. Look, in spite of the tough force and the power and speed that the All Blacks took it to the French, particularly in that first half, I thought he was very spirited. He had a high work rate. His work on defence was particularly effective, and attack. Yeah, he certainly got stuck in, and I thought he had a good night. And Cameron Woki coming off the bench at lock for France. I thought when he came on, certainly that French set piece, the line out was much more effective. The power that he brought to that French pack, you certainly noticed an improvement in the French forward pack. He had a good game for the French. Look, in summary of the match, in the end, a pretty good win to the All Blacks. I think it was driven by a couple of areas. The defence for them was much better than Test 1. The power and physicality they brought on defence, really imposed themselves on the French. Look, ultimately that first half won the Test match for the All Blacks. They were relentless with their speed and power on attack and the variety of attack. It was too much for the French in that first half. The French, look, they made a number of uncharacteristic errors, I thought, in that first half, which really put pressure on them there. They came back in the second half. They were much better. Power and the accuracy the French brought in the second half, much better. But look, ultimately, the game was pretty well won in the first half. Back to the drawing board for the French for the third test. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see what changes the All Blacks make for the third and final test of the series. Guys, let me know your thoughts on the test last night. What did you think of the All Blacks? What did you think of the French? Chuck some banter down below. Guys, if you've enjoyed this review video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, chuck some more banter down. Cheers.